Can everyone see the slide that I have here? Or not see it,
Yes.
as
Yes.
the case may be? Okay, great. So this is an IEEE Humanitarian Technology Board and Site TANZA Grant Program Inclusion and Accessibility Webinar Series event. We have Nathan Clark, who is the chair of the P2998, and Amanda Deol Dhillon, who is an IEEE site group member. And the topic is adaptive designs for accessibility, IEEE Dignity, Identity, Inclusion, Trust, and Agency, which is known as DIITA, developing the standard PAR 2998 interface for the blind. I will do my best to make sure that everyone hears what's going on in this meeting. And when I'm caught unaware of what I'm missing in terms of providing information, Amanda will check me, and Nathan will be the leader of the discussion about experiences for people who have vision loss. So here we have host, Victor and me. We have guests, we have panelists and participants. We're going to have a few welcoming remarks. We'll have a talk by Amanda, who will describe the evolution of the PAR, the transformational journey. That will be igniting the spark, the inspiration behind the PAR for standards. I will be joined by Amanda. We have some slides that might be helpful to remind us of what we intend to speak about. But they are not meant to be relied upon. We're also going to discuss embracing diversity, which encompasses various disabling conditions beyond visual impairment. Amanda will speak about that. Nathan will spend time describing his remote work experience. He'll talk about fostering inclusivity with innovative tools. And I will join Nathan to discuss a broader impact on how DIITA and other standards organizations within IEEE can make a difference. We're going to talk about overcoming hurdles, such as addressing accessibility challenges in digital tools. And we hope to have some panelist remarks. All of you are invited to be members of the panel. Those of you who've been panelists before, you know how this works. We're meant to be a very interactive group, and so people are welcome to ask questions at any time or bring their own personal experiences to the table. Let's see. So now to move into the agenda, there will be some guiding principles discussed which align with the WCAG standards. This is a standard that has been adopted by the World Wide Web organizations. They intend to bring accessibility to the web content, but we in our work group think that there is more to do in this domain. And that's what we'd like to bring into our IEEE community and share with you. We'd also like to look at progress update, our current milestones. We're looking at pioneering tomorrow, envisioning the future landscape of accessibility standards. The three of us will present our ideas, and we'll invite everyone to participate in that discussion. And we're looking to unite for change, extending the invitation to join our collaborative working group. In other words, each of us has a standard that we're working on. We also have activities and projects. You heard a little bit about it a few minutes ago, but there are other activities that we're engaging in, and we invite you to join in those volunteer activities and make contributions. We'd also like to, in conclusion, reflect on the journey and look ahead. And there's also a video on YouTube that we provide to you for your own reference and viewing. The next talk that we have will come up in September 12th at 7:30, and it will be Professor Dr. Razik Yaqub, who's Associate Professor at the Alabama A&M Graduate School. He will be talking topics in adaptive designs for accessibility, wireless shifting mounts for hand cycles and trikes, and PTSD detection device, which is another activity that we will look forward to hearing about. The TANSER engagement, which brings you this webinar. This event has been brought to you as part of the Inclusion and Accessibility webinar series offered by the IEEE Humanitarian Technologies Board and CITE TANSER Grant Program, made possible by the John C. TANSER Memorial Fund of the IEEE Foundation. The program focuses on empowering technologists around the globe to advance assistive technologies and technological solutions for persons with disabilities and their communities, and supporting engineers in low-resource countries. Together with IEEE Standards Association, DIITA, we present this talk by Nathan Clark, Chair of 2998, and Amanda Deol Dhillon, IEEE New Jersey Coast Section Site Group member. This event is also supported by Women in Engineering, Computer Society Leaders and Luminaries podcast, the Standards Association, Dignity, Inclusion, Identity, Trust, and Agency, or DIITA, Transparent Design for Wellbeing and Accessibilities in Technology Workflow, the IEEE ENB Standards, IEEE New Jersey Coast Section Instrumentation and Measurements, Computer Joint Chapter, and the WE Affinity Group. This is a view for those of us who can see this screen. This is what the Humanitarian Technologies new landing webpage looks like. You can find much more information about our activities involving TANSER through this website. We hope people will make contributions. We have new community publications, history, technology, standards, outreach, and recognition activities planned. So now that there's a new TANSER landing page, we're also planning a landing page that will be curating content from Explore. So various articles that are already in the IEEE journals and conference papers, et cetera, will be organized by a curation committee to bring some of these accessibility articles to everyone's attention. We also have humanitarian identity projects going on. We have a focus on humanitarian people and technology in the timeline. For example, we mentioned earlier today, Dr. Patricia Bath, whose invention of the laser Philco device has helped people with cataracts for many years now. We also have IEEE standards engagements, including P2998, P3337, and P3386. Anyone is welcome to participate in these activities. We have the Humanitarian Robotics and AI Humanitarian Technologies Initiative, exploring technology for people with disabilities, which Lonnie was mentioning earlier. Humanitarian technology membership grades, we're interested in exploring how we might be able to recognize people who are involved with various humanitarian technologies. Now that it's achieved a board level at IEEE, it makes sense for us to have associated papers, named awards, and fellows in this domain. So disabilities are typically classified according to 6 limitations: hearing, vision, cognitive, ambulatory, self-care, and independent living. And this is for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 goals, including no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and partnerships for these goals. The global population of persons with disabilities, approximately 15% of the world's population have a disability. 1 in 5 women is likely to experience a disability during her life. 46% of persons aged 60 and over have a disability. That's 46%. That's a pretty high number. 1 in 10 children is a child with a disability. So these are the supporting organizations for our talk, which is the TANSER group, the Standards group, and the Computer Society, as well as Women in Engineering. And then if you're going to be at the Sections Conference this week, we will be covering some issues and pointing out to people how vision, hearing, navigation, dexterity, and more should be engaged by IEEE for inclusion and accessibility. And now we're going to move directly to our speaker, Amanda and Nathan. I'm hoping that you might begin sharing your point of view on the subjects.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you everyone for joining. Really honored to have you. My name is Amanda Dhillon. I was one of the co-founders of AdTech, and recently AdTech Consulting was acquired by another company. So I work for the acquiring company. And while I was at AdTech, I did a lot of work in accessibility, and we had an application which caters to our audience who are blind, and we focused on making the workplace more inclusive. And Nathan Clark was one of my coworkers at AdTech. I let him introduce himself. Nathan, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Nathan Clark. I used to work with Amanda at AdTech, and we partnered on many different projects, including our P2998 project.
Thank you, Nathan. So the P2998 is the PAR. If you're not familiar with the term, PAR stands for Project Authorization Request. And what we focused on was building recommended practices for building accessible applications. So there's not a consistent way to enable web content and web applications to be accessible for people with disabilities, including blindness, visual impairment. And our goal was to provide that enablement through our standard, where there can be a standard practices to include text-to-speech, captioning of images, auto detection of user accessibility limitations that may exist. The recommended practice also provides a consistent method to enable web content and web application to be accessible with additional disabilities. Our PAR project only covered total blindness. And then the second portion of our PAR was to cover partial blindness. So generally speaking, there's not a consistently agreed upon method that defines how to build a website or a tool software application. And during our PAR project journey, we were seeking guidance from WCAG. I apologize, that's my daughter's friend ringing our doorbell. We aim to develop recommended practices for more applications by enabling auto detection of accessibility and auto captioning. What I mean by auto detection, as Nathan is also blind, and if he joins an organization or company to work for, he shouldn't have to declare that he is blind. And if he's using a project management application or a website, it should automatically detect that it's a blind user who's using and should enable the accessibility options. Nathan, would you like to add anything to what I described so far?
No, I mean, that's exactly what I would say.
So Amanda, this is one of the things that we've been struggling with even helping people to understand how accessibility and inclusion is to be mainstream. But what you described really gets to the essence of that mainstream, which is the system either should know the user or infer the user and infer the needs of the user. And you shouldn't have to have a diagnosis or a law or regulation that enables you. There should be, many inferences made from the computer, from the user's, knowing who the user is or how the user does other activities, so that we can detect and determine what kinds of interface or facilitation might benefit this person and offer it to them in a way that's easy to find. I mean, one of the things that's daunting is figuring out how to find the accessibility features in nested systems or services. And if you're if you're completely blind, you have completely different needs than a person who has either a temporary vision loss or color vision loss or some other, reading, people who get fatigued at the end of the day or in the middle of the day and may benefit from some kind of interface from time to time. And that's a wide range of needs for people who have vision loss and who use online systems of all types, not just a workplace system, but anywhere you might be. Amanda, could you share with us a little bit about your discussion about reading a medicine bottle, for example, or going into the pharmacy and encountering a package?
Yes, so I think that's a big problem. Even I can see, and I have trouble reading medicine bottle. I feel like I need magnification glasses or something like that. So if our standard, once we do publish it, and the medicine industry or pharmaceutical industry applies that, so you can have a phone app which can tell you what the image is on the medicine app, or the pharmacy can offer that. And that also is helpful because if someone has a disability and is blind, they are more prone to illnesses as well. So if they need to have access to a medicine bottle, and many times, like my older parents and my in-laws who grab a bottle, and sometimes I see a wrong bottle in their hand taking their medicine. So I think it's a big problem, generally speaking, in our in the world, that there's not really a good solution for it. And
Yeah, in
if we do,
addition, knowing like that a medicine bottle has certain components to it, like when you must take it and what the ingredients are and what other information you may need, that would be very helpful if we have a way to make a standard about it. That would be the thing we would want to know, the context of reading that label, right? So if you're in a store and you're going down the aisle and you find an item and you want to read it more carefully, you might have an app on your phone that allows you to take a picture of that, or scan that label, and then within the context of knowing it's a medicine label, that you can access additional information. And making standards that help us function this way can make things more accessible and improve people's participation in their own life and their own, well-being. They're more independent. One of the issues that people who have, like, I don't know, vision or hearing or other kinds of disabling condition, they rely on others to fill in a lot of these things, a lot of these gaps. During the pandemic, we noticed many, many more people who have disabling conditions suffered from COVID and the consequences because they relied on others, and there wasn't a lot of material available immediately that was interpreted and accessible for people. So this is part of why we see this as such a significant and important humanitarian activity for us as IEEE members and engineers and scientists. Nathan, do you have a minute to
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So what I was gonna say was, there are different services out there that can help people with like accessing medicine, but again, it doesn't allow people to be independent. They have to rely on other sighted people. I know there's a company out there called Accessible Pharmacy that helps blind people with identifying different packaging for medicine. But again, you have to seek them out, and then they can help you make it accessible. But it doesn't come, medicine doesn't usually come out very accessible out of the box, so that's an issue. And there's also another service out there called IEEE, which is where blind people get connected with a sighted person who helps them over the phone with identifying different things, like if you're cooking something, or again, trying to identify medicine. they can help you. But again, it's not really independent. You know, you're having to rely on somebody to be there or having to call somebody. So there are services out there, but it's not true independent.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Sai Padmanabhan from the Long Island chapter. As far as medicines are concerned, usually the pharmacy people always put some kind of a label that includes a barcode. If IEEE were to come up with some standard for that barcode, and if somebody could make a barcode reader that would then read and translate it to audio, then a blind person could be independently taking his medicine from that particular bottle.
Yep.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Amanda, I know we've looked at a number of like GS1 standards and other standards where, like for example, in our humanitarian project during the pandemic, we looked at simple medical devices like blood pressure cuff, thermometer, a pulse ox device, and each item has a number on the side of it that's mandated by, by a standard, and that could be a key to much more information and different formats of displaying the information. When I say displaying, I mean it could be audio, it could be maybe people do well with Braille, whatever the display method might be, or whatever the preferred interface might be by language, by age group, whatever the particular population might be. Amanda, is this something that you've already working on 2998, or do you think this is something that could be enhanced?
I think that is something that needs some enhancement. What our focus has been so far is particularly defining a framework. When a software application is developed, accessibility always have been kind of a second thought. And our goal is to provide those guidelines, not just to software developers, but to designers, to product owners, project managers. So it's from top to bottom initiative, building any software application, that accessibility should be looked through the first requirement and how we make that happen. For example, if there is images on the website and those images doesn't have tags to define what those images are, a beautiful website, it looks beautiful to some, but others can't even book a doctor's appointment looking at that website or going to that website. So our goal is to narrow down the scope to to provide guidance to all levels of stakeholders, building software applications which can be accessible.
Excellent. So then understanding the context is important to figure out what the links could be for a given interface, for example, right? So if you are thinking about a walk down the aisle in a pharmacy, then you might have an idea what objects you might encounter in that pharmacy, and then the people who manufacture those items, make the labeling, etc., should be planning ahead early when they first conceive of these products. And then your standard will provide a way to connect those products to an appropriate application that would facilitate any kind of interpretation that's needed for that product. That's really what you're thinking, upfront design as opposed to an afterthought, so.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, this is Sunish Gupta here. I'm from Boston. So I used to be the chair for the accessibility initiative with the Consumer Technology Association with the IEEE. I did it for a few years until I joined Amazon and then Workday, and then I'm transitioning now. So I'm blind. I've been blind for the last 20 years. I've been an electronic engineer before that, but there are plenty of solutions in the prescription space. There are solutions which are being worked on. I worked on a little bit on the FDA regulation side to make it happen so that drug makers as well as the prescription bottle makers, there are accessible solutions out there offered by CVS or Scripps company also. So there are things exist. I think we need to connect some dots, but it's a great idea to have some kind of uniform standard. WCAG, of course, is a very much web-based and mobile app-based standard. And it's kind of, I would say, vague. And I also started out a standard with the IEEE. It's called the Easy Alliance. I think it's 2843 about 5-6 years ago, but I did not follow through after that, after 2019. But essentially, yeah, it's a great idea to have some set of standards, and then we can invite these corporates or other bodies to be the part of this whole initiative, including the FDA. And if we need to do some regulation-wise, they can be done at the state level, they can be done at the federal level. There are a lot of different possibilities out there.
Awesome.
So,
That's great to
but
hear.
this is a great initiative. I really applaud your efforts in bringing this with IEEE. Can be a great platform, not just because we have a whole lot of engineers and software folks or developers and designers, but also bringing awareness in the general public, because it's more about awareness than about just infusing best practices. But that's a great step one today,
Great.
Yes, and also
Thanks, Manish.
thinking about not having to rely on laws like ADA, for example. If we rely on a law, then people are behind, people are left out. And
Right.
yeah. And then
And
again, you have to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And businesses don't always follow the law anyway, so.
Nathan, do you have some experience with that?
Well, you know. No. I'm part of the National Federation of the Blind, so we're the largest blindness advocacy organization. So I'm familiar with the law and you know, that space.
Yeah. So, and then like, again, with the law, you have this silos that develop instead of having like inclusion or accessibility as the main topic. Then you have, you know, oh, well, what exactly is it that you need? Let's figure that out before we provide it, you know, and then, you know, people try to don't have an opportunity to take advantage of all the excellent designs that are out there. Like each person
Right.
here has mentioned there are designs, and we want to sort of champion bringing them together into standards that can be easy to plan upfront. Right, Nathan?
Correct. Yeah.
And
It's
just
better.
like, just like product managers, they or designers, they have to think about security, about privacy.
Yep.
Accessibility is just another component they should be thinking about from the get-go, and then that's what models we have worked on. That's what initiatives I've worked on in various companies and all that. But again, the more awareness we bring, the more we talk to product managers and designers that let's take a proactive approach as opposed to reactive approach. That means when the product is already shipped, it's too late, right? Of course. So
Yeah, I was gonna say it's better to do accessibility at all levels of the SDLC instead of, you know, after
exactly.
product's been released or, you know, a version's been released.
Should I put some slides back online? Amanda, do we need them? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know if we do. I don't know if we do or not.
Yeah, I'm okay either way. Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's see, what do I have here? So yeah, so inclusion and accessibility help make technology more transparent, even for people who don't typically use technology. So what that means to me, from a humanitarian point of view, is that if this technology and accessibility is in the environment, right? If I go into a workplace or I go into a store and it's obvious that this store or this workplace is accommodating people, then it becomes part of the norm. And it becomes transparent that someone has, you know, that someone has made a law that says you must accommodate, because it's actually part of our society. You know, I would love to know, like, where this, like, it's like a chicken and egg kind of thing. You know, people say, oh, we don't have any mumbledy-such here. We don't have any need for that because we don't have any mumbledy-such here. Well, maybe the reason why is because people don't feel welcome. It's not an inclusive or accessible environment if people don't feel welcome. So how do we achieve that? This is just a question I'm putting out there.
Yeah, I was going to say that, as a blind person, I tend to want to interact with a business that is accessible than a company that's, doesn't have an accessible website or anything, so, bringing repeat business to an accessible website is, it's what you should do. And it's morally right and and legally
Right.
responsible.
So now, can you explain what happened during the pandemic and in your work experiences?
Yeah. So, with everything becoming remote, there was more of a need for, things being in remote or online. So the need for having things on your on a website to be more accessible, having your work or like my work, like accessing materials for my work, having accessible documents being emailed to me. So working with my team, my company, to make sure that I could access the time card mechanism, or if we had meetings, they weren't, the documents were accessible. They weren't the documents were not in PDFs, which generally are not the most accessible. Not to say that you can't have an accessible PDF. I mean, it is a way, but it's cumbersome. So that was what I experienced a lot at work. Do you have any further question that you want to ask me about that?
Yeah, like during the pandemic over those years, do you think people became more inspired to take action, to make changes in this?
I think people realized that there was in order for people who were disabled at work to do their job at the best, they needed, there was a demand for it. People weren't, before the pandemic, I don't think people were as conscientious of accessibility. And then with the pandemic, realizing the limitations of not being able to go in an office environment, being able to having to adapt to your new environment. People, I think companies realized the need for, or that it was, there are benefits to the business, keeping people employed, keeping people part of the company, um, being able to contribute to projects with everything on site or remotely, excuse me. I think that's where that came about a lot. And
So during the pandemic, the World Health Organization even began to step up their contribution to this technology space. They talked about a lot more about universal health coverage and how people who don't have access to accessibility, that it's a hardship for everyone, not just the individual, but their family, the community, the society, and at large. And that when employers aren't providing accessibility, so the kind of like who's feeding this technology that provides accessibility changes depending on where you are, what time in your life, whether or not you have financial resources of your own, whether or not your family can afford, whether there's universal health coverage. All of these things make a difference in whether you have access to accessibility and inclusion, and whether you have quality assistive products when and where you need them. And a lot of this has kind of revealed the fact that there's a large unmet need for assistive products, and that these products are always evolving. So during the pandemic, people had to work at home, so that made an evolution, as Nathan was describing. All these time cards, all these meeting notes, all kinds of things that may or may not have been accessible. It may have been easier for the company to provide some level of accessibility on site, but when people are working remotely, which is like the modern world, right? For many, many employees, they're remote, or they're traveling, or they're working some kind of a hybrid sort of thing. So, and if your accessibility features aren't available in all those circumstances, it's a hardship on everyone. What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, the other point that I missed, my last point, or my last segment there, was I think we realize as a society how large the digital divide has really become over the years, and having inaccessible websites, that what part that plays in the digital divide, and having, how people with disabilities, if they live on their own, they can't, if they, they live on their own and they want to go on a website and the website's not accessible, how that impacts them, in many different ways, financially, health and socially. So how severe the digital divide really was, I don't think our society realized how bad it really was. And I think the disability community has for a long time tried to educate, or try to, was preaching, trying to tell people how bad it really was. And I think the pandemic really showed it to the whole world how bad the digital divide is really, how severe it really is now.
Yeah, and not only is it severe, but also many people have experiences of a disabling condition throughout, during their life at some point, whether it's temporary or longer term. As one of our guests here was mentioning, he became blind 20 years ago. So I'm presuming he's older than 20 years, just guessing. And so there are people who don't have any warning that they're going to have a disabling condition, and they find themselves, in need. And how do, like Nathan knows everything there is to know about various organizations and support systems. But what if you don't? What if your family doesn't know? What if your workplace is unprepared to help you, or your school? What we're trying to do with standards is to make sure that no one is left behind, and to join this, raising this awareness with people, because it's not obvious to many people, and technology is continually evolving. So how do you keep people up to date? You don't want trailing edges, like Nathan and Amanda are saying. These things should be planned into the products up front. Globally, more than 2.5 billion people need one or more assistive product. That's a lot, And with an aging global population and a rise in non-communicable diseases, more than 3.5 billion will need at least one assistive product by 2050, according to the World Health Organization. So some of the issues that we want people to be aware of is that we have a really diverse country. Even here in the United States, the diversity index of the United States is 61.1%, which is sort of high, right? So if you think about the cultural diversity, the linguistic diversity, the kinds of experiences people have in their life, it's difficult to provide accessibility, even if you have like a uniform population. But if you're dealing with people who have different experiences and cultural preferences and so forth, we have to get pretty creative in our standards and in our workplace. We have to consider things like universal design. And this is an example of what the Web Accessibility Initiative looks like. They point out that we have to be understanding of the 4 principles of accessibility: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. These are the 4 principles of accessibility that should be guidelines for accessibility. And then visual impairment, which poses an enormous global financial burden. Costs, productivity losses associated with vision impairment estimated to be $411 billion. The leading cause of vision impairment and blindness are uncorrected refractive errors and cataracts. The majority of people with vision impairment and blindness are over the age of 50 years. However, vision loss can affect people of all ages, and globally, at least 2.2 billion people have near or distance vision impairment. With at least 1 billion, or almost half of these cases, vision impairment could have been prevented or has yet to be addressed. So, and this is I'm showing a chart now, Nathan. The chart shows the differences between people who were affected by COVID, who were men, who were women, and who had it, who were not disabled, who were limited a little, or who were limited a lot. And we can see that there's a much higher mortality rate between January 2020 and February 2021 by disability status and sex. So this is something that's striking, it's measurable, and it's an urgent need. People shouldn't be left to rely on others. People should be helped to be independent by providing inclusion and accessibility. I'm going to turn over this conversation to Amanda now.
It's Amanda.
Amanda?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just had a question for Sunish or input from him that what was his opinion in terms of the pandemic and effect on digital workspace? Is Sunish still on? Oh, he's on mute.
I don't see him here.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. We
Ah,
see him
there.
now.
Yeah, this specifically about the pandemic, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I was actually working for Amazon at that time. It's been only less than a year. I was in Seattle. So we had suddenly, the company has to also pivot towards whatever the need is. So there were two sides to the equation. One was, of course, the customer service side of things. We had to train all the people in the customer service organization who were customer service representatives, whether they are helping people with disabilities over the phone or they were customer service folks. At the same time, I was responsible for making sure there were some high-level escalations to Jeff Bezos' office. So I was handling some of the complex ones which were handed down. We were handling those ones related for the customers. That was number one priority. Number two was, like you also mentioned earlier, that as we as people and employees who are disabled who work for Amazon, they suddenly found that they had to work independently from home. So that means all the interfaces what we use as employees has to be accessible, right? And I'm not sure if you guys know, but Amazon develops its own software which were used for employee facing. They have been making their own software. They don't go to SAP or Oracle. They just make their own software for customer service folks, for managing their human resources. So they do all their cooking their own way. So it was a huge issue, but we were able to pivot. We were able to form a group to respond to this accessibility need, and we trained a lot of the product managers. But again, the needle moved very slowly, but ultimately we were able to get them. But again, the bottom line is that how can we bring awareness? How can we get commitment from the leadership? That yes, anything which we ship, anything which we produce must be accessible. And then the second stage is once you get their commitment, we have to build the learning network so that people can learn. And I totally believe on role-based training programs, which I myself had developed over a number of years, which means there are things which everyone should know. Of course, anybody working in a company should go through Accessibility 101. Then second part is every role, whether it's a product manager or designer, developer, prototype makers, if it's a hardware product, then they have to consider all those physical attributes. All those people play different roles, and they need to know what they need to know for making a product accessible. So it's a huge challenge in bringing the awareness. At the same time, if companies take an accessibility first design methodology, I think we can get further along, And I was trying to be very active in IEEE Consumer Technology Association. Now it's called, at that time it was called Consumer Electronic Association. And the industry was moving very slowly, but in last 3-4 years, this has picked up, especially since the pandemic. A lot of companies want to do it, but they just do not know how, and I think it's a great platform. We should encourage people to develop more material which they can learn, they can certify, develop standards, all sorts of developing things in the ecosystem.
Well, we would love to reach out to you to help us prepare some materials like that. Victor,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Mhm.
one of the things we've been thinking about is like, how do we get people to convert their campuses to accessibility?
Yep.
So because people, like you said, if people have to be trained about accessibility, how do they
Mhm.
understand the experience? Victor and I used to work at Bell Labs. Bell Labs was famous for having been invented by
Right. Of
Alexander
course.
Graham Bell, who is a
Yeah.
teacher of the deaf, right?
Mhm.
So every like week they used to have sign language classes in our building, and we had
Mhm.
a deaf awareness day, which I mean I think people could use more than one day a year, but they would they would hand out earplugs, and people would have to make their way through the day without
Right.
being able to use that sensory input for situation awareness. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't imagine what it must be like to try to have situation awareness and you can't
Right.
see. And if I think people have these kinds of experiences, this is something we could design. We could design an experience like this, whether it's a virtual reality, virtual environment experience, so that people become more aware. And
Absolutely.
then, yeah, but I mean, I think campuses, people at schools, people at, when I say campus, I mean any location. It could be your
Yeah.
job headquarters. It could be, you go into the supermarket and you want to find the stuff, like how do you help people to become more aware of how to make things accessible, places accessible, experiences accessible, so people have that experience of independence that we
Right.
need in our lives.
And universities have been trying that, and there are a bunch of conferences. I can share some links with you guys,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which are specific for accessibility, specific where universities come and learn how they can make their campus more accessible. I myself was a part of this thing because I went back to school. So I had a master's of engineering from University of Central Florida back in mid 90s. And then when I became blind in 2001, I went back to school I went back to MIT to get my second master's in system design management. And my focus was, of course, to learn and how we can make accessibility as part of corporate programs. But again, I was witnessing also how MIT is responding to accessibility. It was not always the best experience. There were lots of challenges, including whether it's a digital library formats, their websites. The professors come up with a 200 slide deck and go through in 50 minutes. How do you go through that as a visual person? They're not going to wait for you. So how do you get that ecosystem developed so you have some volunteers or paid volunteers who would help you out and go through those slide deck and understand how do you get formulas and charts and graphs. It's a whole challenge there. But today we are in a much better position than 10-15 years ago. There are bookshare.org. That's a great resource for blind people to get websites, get books.
Books.
You must be aware of it, right?
I used to be a big user, but not as much anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'm familiar with that. Learning Ally,
Yep. Learning Ally is there.
Library of Congress,
Mhm.
National Braille Press, the big
Right.
one.
Yep. So those are the various ways, whatever your mode of learning may be, whether it's braille, audio, or website, or on your phone app, or there are special devices also. You might have heard of Victor Reader Stream or BookSense. So all these devices are there; they exist. But again, you got to be connected with some community. I had worked for the NFB on working with you might have heard of the KNFP reader, Kurzweil, National
You
Yes.
Federation for Blind Reader.
Yeah.
you were on that?
Yeah, I was the director of the project long time ago, the old one, the physical one. Then they transferred the same code into the app, Yeah. And there's a Seeing AI app also by Microsoft, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I have been involved with people who were with Helen Keller Institute
Mhm.
who have used the Microsoft app and trained blind people. And maybe that is a good organization to approach to find out if we are developing standards, to find out
Absolutely.
what they are doing, because they are able to, the blind people that were trained with that software were able to do web surfing. They were also able to do word processing and all other kinds of Microsoft related applications. So and that is
Absolutely.
what I was trying to, you brought out a good point.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And
You
JAWS
also
is, of
brought out
course,
a good point about who the user testing should be done by, right? It shouldn't be done by people who don't know about this stuff. We should figure out how to make good user groups who can help provide
Yes.
input
Yeah.
for the designs. You know, they could be consulting on any company that's going to design things. They could be, doing user testing because but there is a continuum, right? So some people just have a temporary issue with vision, or they have some non-communicable disease that causes a vision issue, and they should be able to access some kind of accessibility feature without having to go to college and learn how to be a developer, right? I mean, in order to, Sunesh, I mean, do you agree with this, right? Is this
absolutely. In fact,
you can. They
I
have focus groups, I think, at Microsoft that involve blind people. So
Yes.
you know,
but we should.
and it is worldwide. It's not just local in the U.S. So
Right. I mean, but we should take the few things I've learned is that mainstream technology is very powerful. So it never makes sense to develop a highly specialized product just for one small category of people, right?
right.
So let's take advantage of the mainstream technology. They are powerful. We have so much power in our hands. Uh, I mean, this much powerful. What we have in our iPhones went to the moon and back in '69. But uh, but it can do lots of different things. But again, it's the awareness amongst the app designer and the developer. Apple does a pretty good job overall, but still there are some apps which kind
But
of
the
left.
problem with Apple is the proprietary interface and the cost, right? So
Yeah.
if we want to, like you said, if we want to make this mainstream so anybody can access it, it's not just meant for rich
Right.
people who live in developed countries and
Right.
people who have rich parents and people who have a good, job already, right? So we want to make sure that as IEEE Advancing Technology for Humanity, that we figure out a way to level this so everyone has access, so everyone is included. And so I think that's our big challenge at the moment, right?
Exactly. And second point I would emphasize is that let's take an integrated approach. Of course, we are trying to emphasize maybe more today a little bit towards that what's available for the blind people, because that's for the audience is right now targeted. But we should see how all people with disabilities can take advantage of that. And there's a talk actually I gave which is called "This is not rocket science," So this is actually really not rocket science. This is actually all those things are built into already the iOS programming language or Android programming language and websites. It just we need to bring awareness and infuse best practices. There are some free things out there. There are some paid things out there. But I also agree with someone said about the we should have a user testing kind of forum, and that's what I want to kind of kick off is to start a user testing, because companies when they develop something they have no clue whether it works for a blind person or a hard of hearing person or a person with a who is using some special assistive technology. So there should be an ecosystem by which they can get quick turnaround time within a day or two feedback whether it's working or not working.
Excellent. And then our other standard, this P3386 that we're putting to the NESCOM on the 11th, I think it is, of this month, that's meant to be more broad. So this, as you pointed out, today's conversation is about vision, seeing, et cetera. But the other one, we're meant to kind of break those silos and identify things that, user experiences that could be helpful across a number of different needs. So a person doesn't have to be diagnosed as deaf to get captioning and to have word spotting and link to other content and, learn about these cultural things. Some people in certain cultures don't speak about things this way. They speak a different way. And we want to be able to, find dialogic, I think people used to call it, right? Something that,
Right.
yeah. So I hope that you'll help us with all of these plots to take over the planet to make the world accessible, and inclusive.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
but
it's
they're really,
possible. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, but for each of
Possible
these
and we have come a
areas,
long way.
there's also a need to test, to make sure, like you said, how do we know if a blind user can use this thing and if it helps them do their job, right? Unless we have, like you said, the forums, that this way of getting, and it has to be low cost. It has to be, universal. It has to be, universal design and mainstream technologies. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's great. We should continue our dialogue. And I will touch base with you guys later on to find out what other events are happening. And we should develop this whole ecosystem, because now more and more companies and individuals are aware of it, but they just do not know where to go. So we can act as a guiding post for them.
That sounds wonderful. Please send me an email and Amanda and everyone else here so we
Sure,
can
sure.
learn about you.
Yeah. Amanda sent me the slides earlier, so I'm connected with her, but I will.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Victor, do you have any questions or comments or
Yeah, I just have one comment.
Mhm.
It's about a lot of the older people because of various other illnesses, end up getting blind, like things like glaucoma or macular degeneration. And for them to go and relearn everything is very difficult. So whatever age that we develop should be something that is not completely, high technology level, but more simpler for day-to-day use, So
I love this comment.
considering.
I love this comment because, like, especially in low lighting situations, people are unaware. When you're younger, you might be able to see in a low light situation, but as I have gotten older, I can't see in a low light situation, and it makes me unbalanced, so I fall, But if the environment, if the context, like at hospitals, people fall, they're sick, they're taking medication, they've just had a surgery, whatever it is.
Right.
If the lights are low, it's likely people can't see well enough to walk when they could see well enough in their own home, or when they could see well enough when they weren't sick or aging. So they're not, maybe aware they can turn the lights on and get better, vision. These are just simple things we can make a contribution this way, like Sai was saying, is that, as we get older, we're maybe unaware of our sensory changes, but a network, a system can figure this out just from the way we're behaving, by the way we're walking around our home, by the way we, change our habits. These kinds of things can actually be used in a positive way to help people age in place, for example. Or people who have non-communicable diseases that might cause sensory issue, hearing loss, vision loss, proprioception loss, whatever the issue might be, mobility loss, this kind of thing. Just saying.
That's a huge demographic. You're right. I mean, the aging population is a huge one, and they may have not only one disability, or they may not be even legally disabled, but just because you have two limitations, could be visual and auditory limitation, it could be a huge setback for them to use such products and applications, of course.
Right, but then your home environment could automatically adjust the lighting so that you don't have this barrier, and that or someone could suggest to you on an interface, did you realize if you put a walker next to your bed when you first stand up, you can hold the walker until you become balanced? There are lots and lots of things that we can infer from knowing more about the users and the context. So I think the world is our oyster, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're
great.
thinking also about the home, like the home, the office, the smart environment. That's all part of the web now, right? All of this is we're connected, and this should be, part of our thinking, part of our part of our projects. Lonnie had to leave, so sorry. I apologize. Victor, do you have a comment that you'd like to make? Victor, are you there? Uh-oh, we lost Victor. That's not good.
When are the next couple of big events coming
There
up?
he is.
I'm not
There he is.
gone. I've been listening carefully to this, and it looks as if tremendous improvements have been made this past decade. And I guess especially Sunish, you talked a lot about your own experiences. But you know,
I've been dealing with this for last 20 years, and taking a proactive approach and a design infused approach is always the best one. They can always go after the stick, but use the carrots first, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, what technologies do you see? You saying that perhaps we could be using apps, and then from there convert it to speech, to
So there are
understanding, to identify.
it depends again on the need, right? I mean, all these apps you mentioned, Seeing AI and KNFP Reader to Bookshare, but it's also, so these are specialized apps which are meant for the blind population, right? But then there are also we want to emphasize that the mainstream applications. So let's say if you want to check your credit card balance on a Citi mobile app or your Bank of America app, even they should be accessible, right? Because they're not going to make a specialized app for a blind person. So that's what we have to emphasize. And sometimes all they need is a quick feedback. Once they do a quick update, they do not know if something got broken. So sometimes they need a feedback too. So if you, so as a population of the disabled people, one should reach out to the company or give feedback that this is not working. They will fix it. If not in the next version, maybe the next few versions, you know.
So Victor and I and others are looking at a new NSF proposal about accessible workplaces and accessible STEM education. And have you considered how blind interface or technology may help in the workplace beyond what we've already discussed today? Do you have like a holistic idea? Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
So I'd worked for a company called Workday. I recently resigned from Workday, not a few months ago. So Workday is a company which makes all the HR systems. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it. So similar to that one, there are these enterprise resource companies which make like SAP or Oracle. They make such softwares, but there are a host of other softwares made by Microsoft. Of course, you know the basic ones, Word, PowerPoint, and so forth. Even they are evolving every day, right? Every day they put in new features. Many of them are accessible, some of them are not. And it's a continuous improvement, you know, it's happening in these applications, but we have to keep on encouraging them to, you know, make sure it's accessible from the ground up. And it's getting better, you know. I've seen the progression in last few years and it's getting better, but I think most companies can do a better job than that. There's a very good application, I would tell you. It was started by my friend. It's called IRA, AIRA.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier.
Okay, I see. Yep. So that's the application which is, if something is not accessible, you can at least get them on the screen on your computer, and they can help you out in dealing with it. It can get expensive very quickly, but it works very well. You have a human on the other end, and I'm sure within next 4 or 5 years we will have a more AI assisted person who would be helping it, you know.
So if you were thinking about a new NSF program to make workplace and school more accessible for people who have vision issues, what would your emphasis be upon? Would it be on making it more standardized and easier for all kinds of developers to include accessibility, so that is just a natural part of the early process of developing and designing applications?
So here's the thing. So there are, I would say, 3, 4 challenges in the workplace as far as concerned, and it's partly stems these challenges because that's the nature of the beast. And when I say this, I mean the way the WCAG guidelines have evolved. They're simply guidelines, right? And they are not so technology specific. They are very vague. They are very highly generic, and they don't give specific ways on how to test for your application for WCAG, and you can get a score. Okay, this is critical, this is medium, this is serious issue. So those things has to be done in combination of automated and manual tools. Okay. In the light of that, when workplace softwares get developed, testing often doesn't get done by the real user. What I mean to say is that native users who are using this day in, day out, whether they are blind, hard of hearing, they're using, who have mobility issues, they might be using without a mouse or just a mouse or keyboard or pointing devices. It can be very challenging. So having that ecosystem to test it out in that, and giving them an environment to get feedback, meaningful, that would be something which is missing, and that could be great, for a lot of these.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, it occurred to me that even not just only having the ecosystem to do the testing, but also having an ecosystem to teach people who would be co-working with others using these interfaces and co-developing, doing development.
Yeah.
So not just the users testing, but also planning, an instruction course on how to do this type of development would be really great.
Exactly.
It's hard to anticipate what plugins you'd need if you don't know what's really working, what's not working.
Right. So there are, I'm not sure if you know, there's a company called DQ Systems, DEQUE.com. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they make certain tools which a developer can integrate into their environment. They can use linters, they can use scanners, they can use various kind of testing tools by which they can list out all the errors they find. But again, that's the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a lot of goes on back and forth, and they're not going to fix all the 150 bugs they find, right? But they need some help in prioritizing those bugs, right? So that's where they need more guidance. They need more consulting services. At the same time, there's only so much time they have. I call it the spiral model. Spiral means security, privacy, I, internationalization, R, reliability, A, accessibility, and localization. So they have to worry about all these elements of when developing, right? Security is prominent number one, right? Of course, they're not going to ship a product if it is not secured, whether it's a banking app or any other app. Security is prominent. So accessibility does fall in that category also, but we have to educate them. And even the universities today, even the top universities in the world, even they do not have a mandatory curriculum in universities where accessibility is part of their curriculum. You can take some additional course. I myself had taught courses at Northeastern, Tufts, and MIT after I graduated on accessible and inclusive design. But the needle will move very slowly that way. I wish people would incorporate that into every course they teach, especially if it's a design development course, right? So having I'm not sure if we have an education arm within IEEE, but we should work on some curriculum thing. And there is a organization called there's one National Academy of Engineering, and there's also a accreditation, ABET, ABET, right? You might be familiar with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Accreditation Board of Engineering and Technology, something like that. So we should work with them closely to develop some curriculum in partnership so that all electrical computer engineering courses across all US worldwide should follow certain standards and minimum things so that it's engraved into the curriculum. So it's a long shot.
One of the things we can do through the Humanitarian Technologies Board is to create some tutorials that would then be published and appear in Explore, and then, as you said, be offered as coursework for either, universities or other organizations that would need that type of training or should have that type of training based on where they sit in terms of what kind of stakeholders they are, whether or not they,
Exactly.
yeah. And so I think we would be very excited to learn more about the courses you've already taught and see how we might be able to move those into a tutorial format that would be helpful for many, many people. And we could publish it and include it on our Humanitarian Technologies website and as you said, look at ABET, look at National Academy of Engineering. Victor, you remember that, right? Aren't you a member of National? Yeah. And
And
so,
better then there's a couple of more in the US, and there are some worldwide. Other countries also may have the same thing. Europe, I think European Union is also moving very fast these days. It's getting much ahead of actually WCAG and doing very well in following these guidelines, in general,
and also the Computer Society, which is sponsoring our podcast, our Leaders and Luminaries podcast. We can have another podcast devoted to this topic, maybe a series. And maybe a series of these, which would be, excellent because it's a different kind of format. We can repurpose a lot of the elements of these formats for individuals, and we can slice them into individual topics so people can focus on 3 to 5 minute segments that answer their question right away, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sunish, you have talked about so many different apps and other, resources. Is it possible that you could send some kind of an email or something about all this information put together into an email and send it to people so we can forward it to other people that may be interested in.
Sure. I'll send to Amanda, and then she can forward it to everybody. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Very good.
Well, thanks everyone for coming to join our presentation tonight. It was great to have the conversation that we had tonight.
Sure.
Nathan, do you have any other comments that you'd like to share with us?
No,
Nathan?
I mean it was a very lively discussion, and it was great to hear everyone's thoughts, and we'll obviously continue the conversation hopefully.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you for being our speaker.
Thank you for having me.